Hey, I went to college. I know stuff. Hey, welcome to another video. I wanted to discuss for a few minutes the law of diminishing returns and how it can apply to your photography purchases. In simple terms, the law of diminishing returns is an economic theory that says that the more money you push at something, eventually you can only earn so much money. When I was in college, I had to take a series of economics classes because I was an accounting major. And in one of those classes, I had to do a paper on the law of diminishing returns. And at that time, I based my paper on the New York Yankees because George Steinbrenner was now the owner, and he was in the process of buying a lot of expensive players trying to win world championships. And the theory goes, in simple terms, that the stadium only holds so many seats. You can only sell out the stadium to a limited number of seats. In other words, there's a finite number of seats you can sell during the season. There's also a number of finite viewers that'll watch your broadcasts. Now, back then, television didn't rule nearly as much as it does now. It wasn't quite as important. So they relied more on attendance. Can't say more on attendance, but the television viewership and the ad revenue wasn't what it was in today's market. In other words, there's only so much revenue to be had, but as you increase your expenses, it might not add that same amount of revenue. I hope I'm explaining that properly. But I wrote that paper back a long time ago. How does that apply to photography? Well, if you're new to camera buying, there's a lot of things that you have to consider before you buy your first camera. And the one thing that I'd like to discuss, because I don't hear that many people talk about it. So if you're a beginning photographer, one thing you need to consider is you can't look at it as a budget to buy a camera. And what I mean by the difference between a camera budget and a photo budget is the first thing you have to really think about is, what is it I want my camera to do for me? Am I going to be more of an all-around photography person, or am I going to be more of a niche photography person? And again, I'm not here trying to push you one way or the other. I'm only letting you know that there's a big difference in the system, the brand maybe, the camera setup that you want to get based on what it is you want to photograph. For example, you're a street photographer. The reason why a lot of street photographers use either the Leica Q system or the Fuji, I forget the model number, it's the 100V, I think, or whatever it is. But anyway, the point is that it's like this camera. This is a Nikon Z8, but it has a small form factor to it. If you're a street photographer, the last thing you want to do is walk around with a big camera like this and stick it in everybody's faces. Look at the difference in the form factors. So there's a variety of sizes of cameras you can buy, and that's one thing to consider is the form factor. If you're a landscape photographer, the form factor might be somewhat important. If you're older like me and you don't want to carry around a lot of weight and a lot of lenses all the time, it might come into play. What might be more important will be the dynamic range of the camera. It might be, if you're a nighttime photographer and you're shooting the Milky Way, it might be, is it good in low light situations? And what lenses can I get that will allow me to shoot the Milky Way? If you're a sports photographer, does the system I buy into have long lenses for sports. So as a street photographer, you might consider buying into the Leica Q system, but you're not going to use it for sports. So there is a wide variety of cameras, form factor, weight, and everything else, depending on what it is you want to photograph. If you're a wedding photographer, well, a lot of them use the 70 to 200 lens. You're going to probably look at more of an all-around camera. Does it shoot well in low light? How many megapixels does it have? What lenses can I get to it? I'm not saying you can't shoot a wedding with a Leica Q system, but it's probably not going to be your first choice. There's also, when you consider a camera, is the sensor size. Now I'm going to exclude film, because film, if you're shooting an 8x10 camera, 16x9, whatever, the size of your negative essentially is the size of your sensor, right? But even in digital cameras, you still have medium format and full frame and APS-C and micro four thirds, and to some people, I've seen people on here say, oh yeah, I'm going on this once in a lifetime trip and I'm only going to use my iPhone to take all my photographs. Okay, that's fine for them. You get home and you have this great image and you want to blow it up to 30 by 40. Good luck. And the reason why is because the sensor inside that phone is so much smaller than what's on a full frame or a medium format camera. There's far less detail that you're going to get once you start blowing up your image. So for people to think there's no difference between medium format, full frame, or a sensor inside an iPhone or even an Android phone, you're just fooling yourself. How does all this get back to the law of diminishing returns? I realize that there's some that, I mean, you might even be one of these people that jump from camera brand to camera brand because you like trying out different systems. I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money. I'm not here to tell you you shouldn't do that. But I'll bet if you admit it, when you jump from brand to brand, you're losing a lot of money. And how much better is your photography? Are your images that much better? Some might argue, well, yes, I went from micro four thirds to a Fuji 100S. I got a lot more detail and I'm a portrait photographer. Then I would agree with you. You're going to make more money. Your equipment is going to be better suited for what you're trying to do. In that case, well, yeah. But if you're just an all-around photographer and you're jumping from brand to brand, you're going to lose money. But that's not the real issue with the law of diminishing returns. Because camera companies pump out new models every year, every 2 years, that means even, say, my Nikon Z8 that I just love. Now I'm filming on a Nikon Z7 too, and I enjoy that camera as well. I do think the Z8's a better camera. And I've said this many times, if I was strictly a landscape photographer, I would have stuck with the Z7 too. Because I don't think that the images that come off this Z8, quality-wise, are really any better, significantly better, that come off that Z7 too. I don't think they are. But if I'm shooting sports, I want this camera. I don't want that camera. That's just a fact. Some people will dispute it. I've used both cameras. So for me, it was an upgrade based on that. And it wasn't because I'm going to make more money with the Z8, because I'm not. What it does, it makes me a happier photographer. I enjoy my photography more. You can't equate that with money, but you can equate that with your enjoyment of photography. Recently, in the last week or so, I bought a little hard drive and I started organizing all my images that were really only on one hard drive, and some of them were backed up onto a Blu-ray disc. But as they say, you really should have 3 backups. So I bought a little SSD drive and I started organizing the photos that I really don't want to lose. And I went back over the last oh, about 8 to 10 years now. And I found that as my enjoyment of using the camera went up, I shot a lot more photos. I shot more images in half of 2023 and the first 2 months of 2024 than I did in 2015, 16, 17, and 18 combined. So it made me go out and use my camera more. I enjoyed it more. So I can't equate that to money, but I can equate it to my own personal enjoyment. Now, part of it is I have more free time now. That is part of it. Part of it is I have grandkids playing sports now. That's part of it. So there are other factors other than the enjoyment of the camera, but that's part of it. Law of diminishing returns. To me, I think it's important to buy into a camera system and stay within that system. Don't look at it as I can't upgrade the cameras, because the camera is going to lose its value. As those new models come out, you're going to lose value in selling off your older camera bodies if you flip them around every 2-3 years, which some people do, some people don't. I tend to try to hang on to mine a little bit more because I can't afford to go and buy a new camera every 2-3 years. But what doesn't change if you stay within the same ecosystem are the lenses. And to me, when I get back to camera budget versus photography budget versus law of diminishing returns, how it all plays in is if you stay in that same ecosystem and you buy into their lenses, the lenses don't change. Yeah, they come out with new lenses and occasionally they'll upgrade them, or you might go from, you know, a 1.8 to a 1.2 lens. Well, you might not need the 1.2 lenses. One of my favorite lenses is the Voigtlander f2. Even if I were to sell that Voigtlander f2 lens in the future, I won't lose any money on it. Or if I do, it'll be very little, especially if you buy it used to begin with. If you buy it used, 5 years later, odds are it's going to be pretty much the same price on the used market. A lot of lenses are that way. Now, when Nikon went from their F lenses and now they're into their Z line lenses, their S lenses, don't confuse, not all Z lenses or not all lenses that work on the Z or Z system are S line lenses. A lot of them are, not all of them are. So don't confuse the same terminology. They are different. But to me, I think that if you don't want to lose your value with your photography budget, pick a form factor that you like with your camera. But it's more important to buy good lenses and stay with them, because they're going to stay with you a lot longer. I had some F lenses that I used for 20 years. And when I sold them, even then, I didn't lose that much money on them when I converted over to the Z system. I lost a little bit of money, but I used them for 20 years. All the enjoyment I got out of them, and for a while I did work for Max Preps and I made a little money selling high school photographs. And if I were to add that all up, I probably didn't lose any money on those lenses. Whereas the cameras, I don't remember what I paid for the Nikon F5. It's a film camera, but I think I sold it for $100. And I know I paid a lot more than $100 for it. So I lost money on the camera, but I didn't lose money on the lenses. When it comes to buying lenses, you might not be able to afford the fastest lens, the best lens at first. That's fine. You work your way up to it, but at least you're in that same ecosystem to where once you decide, well, maybe I really would like to have that f1.8 lens instead of an f2.8 lens for whatever reason. You can sell that f2.8 lens and not really lose a lot of money and buy the 1.8 lens. And so that's where the law of diminishing returns comes in. If you're jumping from system to system, then you have to sell off your lenses. You have to sell off your camera. You might even have to sell off your camera bag because your new system doesn't fit in it. And again, that gets back to a photo budget rather than a camera budget. And I think too many people get caught up into, they look at it and say, oh my goodness, that camera is $3,000 and that's my budget. No, buy a used $1,000 camera and get a $1,500 lens and you'll be happier. So look at it as a photography budget. But not only that, do you want to travel? You know, what's in your budget to be able to travel some? Buy one tripod. Spend the money and get one good tripod. Don't buy a bunch of junk tripods. And through my experience, they're right. You know, again, I'm not sponsored by them. I use FLM tripods. I had not to the fault of the tripod, I had an issue because I shoot a lot in salt water here at the beach, and there's a little plug inside the bottom of the tripod that you need to take out and clean, otherwise it gets all gunked up. And even though I clean it, it still was a little rough, so I contacted FLM and I asked if I could buy a couple of the little, they're like little white, it's hard to explain. They're very inexpensive. It's just a little piece of plastic. And he sent me a little bag of them for free. That's good customer service. Because of things like that, you know, now I'm loyal to FLM tripods. So you have to think in terms of long term. Don't think in terms of what's this camera going to cost me? What's my overall photography budget going to cost me overall? And how do I minimize that cost as much as possible? What lenses can I get that I can use for a variety of things? If you look at a lot of the top photographers in just about any genre, you know, street photographers might only use one or two different lenses. If they're in the Q system, well, that's an attached lens. They're stuck with that, I think it's 28 millimeter. But even a portrait photographer, they probably only have 2 or 3 lenses. It doesn't matter what brand they shoot. They might have an 85 millimeter, they might have a 135, they might have a 300. They might have a 70 to 200, I don't know, but they're usually, they might even have a 50. But typically they're going to stick with 2 or 3 lenses. Landscape photographers, if you watch a lot of the other channels, which you probably do if you're watching this one, a lot of them talk about they're only going to take 2 or 3 lenses. You know, I've mentioned a couple times I'm going to Iceland in May. I'm going to limit myself to 3 lenses, partially because of the weight, partially because, from what I understand, it's very windy there and you don't want to be changing a lot of lenses outside and get your sensor all gunked up. So I'm trying to limit it. So you buy those lenses that allow yourself to do that. The point I'm trying to make is, I know I've been long-winded in this video and I've been a little scattered. When you start photography in particular, don't think in terms of a budget for a camera. Think in terms of budget to fulfill your photography needs. Try to make the right decision based on not only currently what you like or what you think you're going to want to photograph, but long term, what is it I might want to photograph in the future, and stay within that ecosystem. Again, I'm not trying to tell you what brand to buy into. A lot of people look at it as buying into a camera system, and I'm saying no, buy into a lens system. What lenses will make me happy? Bottom line, think in terms of an entire photography budget, not a camera budget, because then the law of diminishing returns won't affect you as much. You won't have to buy as much equipment. You won't have to keep buying lenses and buying equipment to think that your photography is going to improve. It's not. There's only a finite number of accessories you can buy that's going to improve your photography. It just doesn't happen that way. Buy into an ecosystem, get some good lenses, get the accessories you need, and stay there. That's how you don't lose as much money when it comes to your photography. I hope some of that made sense. I went to college a long time ago, so sometimes I can't explain it very well, but I did my best. I hope you learned something. If you did, please like and subscribe. Till next time, take good care. See ya.